Shalom, it's Brother Yara, giving all praise to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rachach Kodash. And I just wanted to get this. China, in reference to World War III, proves that Obadiah 1 and 7 is coming to pass. And the whole chapter of Obadiah 1 is good, but the main point is Obadiah 7. And I'll get this article to back that up. I'll start at verse 6. It says, "How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee, that they eat thy bread, have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him." And so if you go to this article here, it says, is China preparing for war? And it goes in deep, about how China is just really one example of one of the nations that were considered, part of our confederacy, which means we have a lot of trade to deal with them, on the surface level of politics, we're at peace with them, but really it's just a Cold War that's been brewing in these so-called trade wars. It says China is on a war footing while the COVID-19 outbreak has exposed some grave political miscalculations behind the decades of international strategic relations with Beijing. The depths of our problem are only just beginning to dawn on us. Fueled by our desire for ever cheaper goods, the world has collectively sleepwalked into a supply-side dependency on the People's Republic. All those factories we've been giving over to these corporations to get their labor costs down, to get their production costs down. China owns all those assets now. Next paragraph. The gamble has been pitched as a trade-off. China was expected to evolve democratic norms and embrace relations with the international community while we got richer from globalization. But we have been played. Boy, have you. It says whether it's clothing and factory fashion, personal protective equipment, or hardware parts, too many of our manufactured goods today rely on a made-in-China supply chain. At the same time as it was busy taking control over our manufacturing, China was busy cloning Western software via her lackadaisical respect for international copyright rules, and that's true. every so-called invention has come from the West. China has copied and mimicked it, and they can do it perfectly because you've outsourced the manufacturing to them, so they have all the blueprints on. They can make a perfect iPhone because all the iPhone factories are in China, and that's what they're alluding to here. There's no respect for the international copyright rules, and while the world relies on China for hardware, it says China avoids software dependency on outsiders by creating substitutes: TikTok to replace Snapchat, Weibo instead of Twitter, WeChat and Renren for Facebook. Indeed, there's an alternative Chinese version for almost any platform. With manufactured goods and hardware made in China and software increasingly cloned in China, what of natural resources? Through the Belt and Road Initiative, a 21st century Silk Road connecting China to Europe over a network of land and sea trade routes, the People's Republic has embarked on huge infrastructure projects in 60 countries, including loans and construction projects that secure key ports and mines as collateral to China for payment. It says look to Pakistan, Africa, or Southeast Asian nations to see China's rapid expansion and ownership of mines and ports. Look to the UK and China's attempts to secure telecoms industry via the Huawei deal, and that's going into the 5G, which is a whole nother topic, which they're trying to get 5G, the new internet infrastructure. They're trying to replace all current infrastructure of the internet with 5G and do what you call industrialized internet, if you Google that term. So her recent purchase of British Steel, this is China purchasing British Steel Company, so they're doing business with Europe, and her quest to secure the nuclear power industry. Beijing even secured a deal to develop British nuclear station, Hinkley Point C in Somerset, thus paving the way globally for China to enter the global market to dominate nuclear power. Wow. Since over decades, we have naively outsourced or lost manufacturing software, natural resources, and critical infrastructure to China. The economic benefits of globalization are well trodden. Yet COVID-19 has shown it has left our society vulnerable during a major crisis. Boy, has it. Unable to manufacture the most basic of necessities such as PPE, which I have to look what that is. Meanwhile, China has achieved self-sufficiency. While pursuing economic dominance abroad, China's communist one-party state has centralized political power at home, gained unprecedented command over her own population via wide-range and well-documented spy tech, and placed anything between 1 to 2 million Uyghur Muslims in gulags. Sheesh. Considering what we know of colonial history, there's little room for doubt that China is at a pre-colonial stage. States at this stage attempt to centralize domestic power under a strong leader, dominate global supply chains, and monopolize industry, all while expanding abroad to secure natural resources. China is aggressively pursuing total national self-sufficiency, and the question arises as to why. And the reality is they're not allies to America. They want to rule over Babylon, you know. My conclusion is that China is preparing for war, total, not limited, the kind that seeks to rebalance the world order, tipping it in her favor by replacing the U.S. as the dominant global power. Historically, major conflicts have arisen when the leading global power is challenged by a rival, a problem known as the Thucydides trap. Thucydides trap, Salakia. And China is expected by some metrics to overtake the United States as the world's largest economy this decade. Also, and crucially, unlike us, China is preparing for the next type of war. The People's Republic knows that she cannot beat the U.S. militarily and knows that type of ground war is almost over. So China is outsmarting America, basically. It's already taken over manufacturing. It's already getting a leg up in the economy. It's already copying all the technology it needs, and it has total control over its own population. And it's also making deals with other nations that are at odds with us, like Russia, who's in league with Iran, you know, who's in league with India and all these other nations. Yeah, man, Obadiah 1 and 7 is happening right before our eyes, you know. It said, instead of securing global supply chains, maintaining IT dependence, and having a cast iron grip over her own population, China can focus on building her cyber and biological war capabilities while remaining relatively safeguarded against the same herself. Considering all of this, from steel to nuclear telecoms, our policy towards China until 2020 can be best described as one of miserably failed economic appeasement. From China's perspective, she has successfully gifted us a Trojan horse. And the Trojan horse is the most befitting term from that, what Obadiah 1 and 7 is saying, when that wound is laid under thee. You know, you lay a wound under somebody, you know, it's likened unto a Trojan horse, you know, if you're not looking at it from a physical war perspective, but it's going to get physical. So what is the solution? It says, do we take that bait and prepare for war 2? No, we must first understand what happened and grasp how it came that we so willingly handed China the very tools by which to defeat us. And, you know, and the answer to that question is that it's prophecy. It's the Most High is in complete control of everything, and he's made America do this. These Americans. Next paragraph, it says, for too long, China has had a strategy for dealing with us, while we have had no strategy for dealing with China. We must urgently pivot our strategic relationship, one that entails assuming that China is in a cold war with us already and ends our current naivety. We must minimize our total global supply chain dependency on China. Good luck with that. Or any one nation for that matter. Trade with China, yes, but we must ring fence critical infrastructure, nuclear, telecoms, and natural resources such as steel, as recent politicization of the WHO highlights, the World Health Organization. The post-war international community, supposedly governed by the UN, is no longer serving its purpose, and perhaps more than ever, the UN faces a crisis in moral authority. Instead, NATO style, we must reorder our strategic and military alliances around the Pacific and build an international consensus against the broader expansionist desire of the Chinese Communist Party. Just like with nuclear non-proliferation, there must be newly developed global consequences for negligence in cyber and biohazard safety. Post-COVID, we would be wise to build a new global consensus on which punitive measures are suited to states that violate our cyber or biological safety. Whatever happens in China does not stay in China. Whereas our Orientalist-based othering of China created this blind spot, only our hubris and naivety would allow for us to continue thus blind. We have been outmaneuvered, but this pandemic has magnified our failures and brought them to the fore. We would only be deserving of loss if we did not learn the lessons now. Wow, And the reason that they're so naive is that pride, and that they're talking about in these last paragraphs about like what America must do. Like it's the pride of these leaders of Babylon the Great, and I'll just get Obadiah again. I'll start from verse 1 this time and read through verse 7. It says, "The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Most High concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. The pride of thy heart has deceived thee." And that's that last piece. Why is America so naive? Why did they give up all the manufacturing? The pride of thine heart has deceived thee. They don't think China is going to ever strike back or conspire with another nation. They think that, that in other words, that they're God on earth. That's what Esau likens himself as, and who would dare challenge us? It says, "The pride of thine heart has deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground?" Right? Well, China is going to be a major part of bringing you down to the ground. It says, verse 4 says, "Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though I set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Most High. If thieves came to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If the grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up?" And finally, verse 7, "All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him." And that's going to include Europe eventually. All of the world's going to turn against America, which is Babylon. So hopefully you brothers were edified, and repent, come back to the Most High, man, because World War III is on its way.